Welcome back to Dat Build. Today I'm continuing progress, obviously, of my Porsche Turbo Replica chassis, Beetle chassis. Today I'm actually doing a bit more cleanup inside the tunnel. I have a couple of things to do in preparation for that. Number one is a lovely roll of tape, which not only is handy for shutting me up, but also handy for adorning the edges here, which I'm going to do because when I spray the fish oil inside the tunnel to seal everything up and of course then give it its final protection coat, I don't want any of that along the edge. That is of course where I need to weld. So I've done a bit of a cleanup from the rust converter. It's not too bad, and of course most of what remains here is of course the converted metal. So this will more or less just protect it. So the fish oil itself, great big 4-liter container here. When I'm spraying it, and I will be kind of spraying over the edges just because I really want to meet it up to the seam, it won't affect that. And of course when I go to seal it up completely, I will of course then stick the hose through whatever remaining holes I have, the shifter, the park brake, and yeah, pretty much the foot pedal assembly. I can just more or less spray the edges, so it'll just get really in everywhere and protect everything, which is pretty much the aim of the game here. So roll of tape first, then more or less fish oil, and then move on to the next thing. I have a couple of parts, and I've actually had a really great idea with one of the biggest issues I've had, and one thing I really wanted to get over with regards to this tunnel. So let's crack on. So it's been 24 hours, and stupidly when I was doing the top section here, it dawned on me right at the very end that what I did on the bottom with the tape, I also needed to do along here, and of course, so I'll have to let this rest a while longer and then more or less clean this off. It is a bit rough around the edges because of the drill holes, so they do need to be smoothed out as well. So at the end of the day, yeah, it was just a misstep. It's not that vital. It's the morning. It's not that vital because realistically, unfortunately, I'm still a ways off from resealing this to the tub, and I'll get back to that in a very short moment. But in the meantime, we are pressing on with getting everything else done. So this is going away now. I'm sure it's still sticky. Looks sticky enough. Ugh. I was a little unsure about this fish oil because it went on rather thin like water, and the stuff I've used in the past was already a sort of maple syrup consistency, and this was kind of spraying on. Looking over it though, it has left on a rather decent layer. I can see it all across. Yeah, it's just a completely different makeup and, you know, different brand in general. So not what I've used in the past, but it's done the job quite well. It's coated everything rather nicely. The top section has a rather good layer on it, which doesn't really need. The base is where it's at. This section here, when I actually do reseal it, I might douse a bit more through the back section where I've got a cavity there. So just so it's really nice and lathered on the base, just so there's no rust corrosion, or just a preventative measure in the future. And of course I do want to get this this seamed ridge, and of course along here as well, which currently isn't done and I can't do until it's sealed. Moving on, so some of the parts have turned up. One has been kind of hiding in the background, perhaps you've seen it in the shop beforehand, but I do have the bush now for the shifter, so I am going to install that. That'll be done now along with the shifter rod. That's another job done and out of the way, so that'll be resting in there, and eventually we'll get to eventually we'll get to put the shifter back in, but that's a long ways off yet. So this will go back in. I do have the original spring. Annoyingly, when I ordered it, the picture had the spring, the little clip that holds it in place, but of course it wasn't included in the packaging. Not a big issue. Luckily I had one. And then the clutch cable. Now, from memory, I think I sprayed, I honestly can't remember now, but I don't really want to redo it. I'm kind of past that point. I'm pretty sure I did spray the rust converter through all the channels, but now I'm looking at the run. I'm not sure I did, which is a little annoying, but it's done now. It doesn't really matter, because what I have decided to do, and it's most likely overkill, I'll put that in, and then of course most likely drag out a bit of rust along with it. What I'm going to do is simply pump it full of high temp grease. So once the cables run through there, get a grease gun at one end and just pump the grease through. It'll stay in there for a long time, and of course it's just preventative measure. It's not like a lot of dirt and debris makes its way into the tunnel, so it's not really going to pick up and of course cause issues. I'd just rather have that extra little bit of security, because the tunnel was exposed to so much moisture and water over time. I'm pretty sure the inside channels here aren't the greatest, so I'm going to do that. So yeah, I'll crack on and then we'll talk about the next thing. Surprisingly not too bad, which is a really good result. So again, I'm not entirely sure if I did spray the rust converter in there. I really can't tell, but regardless of the fact, I'm still going to pump it full of grease just for a bit of assurance, and of course just means I don't have to worry about it in the future. It is out of my mind. Shifter linkage, I'll also put a bit of grease just around near the bush itself, just so it glides a bit easier. It is a bit stiff at the moment obviously, but yeah, apart from that, that went in reasonably well once it started to go through. But onto this. So I've actually had a really great idea looking intensely, very intensely, at the chassis with regards to running the hard brake line. So with the kit that I'm getting, it is more or less designed to replace the exact same route as what it actually had. But what I'm going to do is drill a hole that doesn't exist presently, but there is a hole at the rear. Because of the way this car will have to be, it's only going to be a two-seater, so the back section isn't as vital, and I'm most likely going to have something in there to kind of mask things. So with that being the case, this hole, which is about here, I am going to actually drill a hole just after the pedal hole assembly section. So there will be basically a run that I'll do along the inside channel that pops out here. That is a very short amount of extra travel that the hose has to make. I should be able to have still enough length there to make it to the brake master cylinder, to make it to the T-piece at the rear, without there being an issue. The only thing is, this hardline that I'm buying at the moment is designed for the factory setup. I've still got to do a bit more research into exactly what I'm doing with the brakes, whether or not that brake master cylinder, the standard one, or the oversized one anyway, for the four-wheel disc brake setup, is enough for what I want to do. It shouldn't be a problem, but it's more or less the routing of the hard line. I don't want to keep bending that hard line if I'm going to put the original one in and then maybe upgrade or what I need to do. So I've got to try and figure that one out first. But I'm going to more or less drill a hole once I get that hardline kit in through here, route it through starting at the back, so I do have a point of reference for the front, and then just leave the front a bit untouched. So I'll bend that in the future once I figured that out. But that means all these stupid little tabs, I'll remove them, so I'll grind them off, and then I can actually have the clean tunnel I want. I will get to what I'm going to do with this ugly mess on the side here. I do have a good idea with regards to that, so that's one really good result. That's something I really wanted to do, and yeah, it just means that now I can actually have a nice clean tunnel, just have that painted so it looks really presentable, just have the shifter linkage, the park brake, and that'll just be a bare section at the front there. So just gives that kind of, you know, racing spec look as such. Like some of the RSRs. I'll throw a picture up in a second of an example. But yeah, moving on to the next thing. So I've hit a bit of a flat spot in that I've actually got nothing to continue with at the moment, which is really frustrating. With my decisions now, run the brake line through the internal of the tunnel, definitely not regretting the decision. I absolutely love the idea, but it's kind of screwed me because now I've really got nothing to progress with. The grommets for the brake line itself, and the parking brake cables actually are all coming together. So waiting for those parts to come in, who knows when, means that I can't seal up this tunnel. There is a bit of work I can do. This base plate is not really in the greatest of order because prying it off, obviously the metal is a little jagged and warped, so I can go about panel beating that back into shape. At least that gives me something. But beyond that, I've really kind of got nothing. So, progressing forward, and I have actually got to make a phone call today just to confirm this 100%. But the next thing, obviously, after that's sealed back up, is obviously the floor pans. Really annoyingly, but at the same time, I do really like the idea. Once again, Ian in the comments, who is a group member of the Porsche Replica owners, he actually has made some custom floor pans for his 356 machine, and of course I really like the idea. Number one, the standard floor pans are a 1.2 millimeter thickness, and of course when they come to the edge here, they're just a lipped C-channel. There's no box or anything like that. Therefore, all the strength within the vehicle itself comes from the body resting along that section. Still not as structurally sound, but for an old car like that, it sufficed. For this thing though, the problem was that with the original floor pans, I did have tearing in certain spots. And of course, those floor pans were the thinner material. They weren't the thicker 1.2s. But with making custom floors, I can do 1.6mm plate. And then of course, with the outside, I can do box. And depending on how I go about it, I've done a bit of measuring and everything like that. It would be a 1.6mm RHS rectangular tube section, but it just means it's so much more structurally sound. And very much like Ian's done, he has the plan to have the seat runners and everything like that. He's got the seat runners going across. That's more bracing. That's bracing from the wall to the tunnel. It makes it more rigid, more structurally sound. I do really like that idea. It does mean way more work, way more fabrication, which on my part realistically is not something I have the technique to do, but I wouldn't mind learning it. It is another thing that I can do on top of building this car. It'd be something of my own instead of just buying some pans and then tack welding them in. Another factor there is the price. It is a quarter of the cost to buy the materials I need to do these floors. I already have the welder, and then it's just my time, and essentially everyone kind of classes this differently. I see it as being free because I'm not selling this to make money. I'm not making money out of this at all. So realistically, this is just me and my time. I'm still always off doing this, and there's going to be a lot more obstacles that delay me. I've still got to sort out that body. I've still got to sort out this frame. I've still got to have it structurally tested. So there is a lot of obstacles in the way before I get to the end game. So with that being the case, much to my friend's dismay, who was really trying to talk me into not putting the floors custom, I think I'm going to. I really think I am. I like the idea, I really do. But of course, that's still a little ways off because I can't do that until I can flip it back over. But what I can do though is start to remove these rear end suspension sections, because when it goes on the floor, I want it to be on a flat surface. The mounts here are sticking a little too high. It does kind of bump the arse up a bit. So I'll remove those. They have to be removed anyway. I am going to replace those bits. Just makes it a bit lighter too, so I can move around a lot easier. And then, unfortunately, I had a cardboard collection. Stupidly didn't even think about this, and there was some rather large chunks of cardboard, and I've destroyed all this cardboard here. So I've got to wait for some more disposable materials so I can actually then mock up some floors, some fake floors, and then I can really start to lay things out. Then when I get the raw material, just trace it out and cut it. So I've already priced it up, I've already thought in my head how to go about it, and I am really keen to do it. So that might very well be the next thing coming up. It's probably still a couple of weeks away, because again, I've got to finish this first, weld this back up, get this sorted, and then I can drop the pan and start working on those. So what's going to happen after this, I don't know, we'll find out. But that is this week's episode. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. As always, like, subscribe, comment below, etc. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your neighbour that if there's ever something fishy around, just check and make sure there isn't actually a tuna. Well, in there, no, I'll actually go there. Anyway, you guys, until next time, cheers.